Hey everyone, Jason Shepard here of M0A.com. And this week's video comes from not only a friend and fan, but an online ground school member, David Barber. So David, thank you so much for this great idea. The topic is, if I could do my flight training over. For example, David's just getting ready to begin his flight training and is already off to a great start. But what if I could go back in time and start over and do my flight training over? What are some things I would have done now looking back in hindsight? Well, one of the first things I would have done personally is I would have gone out and got my FAA medical first. Again, there's no sense in wasting all this time going through all this stuff if I can't accomplish the goals that I desire to do, getting a private pilot certificate. Now, light sport aviation has allowed us kind of a way out. A lot of times students go through their flight training, they got 10, 15 hours, it's getting ready to solo. By the way, do you have your medical? And there's a little hiccup. Even perfectly healthy people are finding things in their medical history that could hinder them from actually getting a medical. So one of the first things I would do when thinking about learning to fly is get that FAA medical and knock it out. Especially if you're under 40 with the new validity, it's good for 5 years. So have it and have it knocked out. The next thing I would have done is enrolled in some sort of ground school, whether it be an online ground school or a physical one, or just done some groundwork with my instructor. My thing was, I was just so excited to get out to the airport and get flying that I was really wasting a lot of my money and a lot of my instructor's time, because half the time I had no clue what was going on up there working on my private pilot certificate. My instructor would say, okay, we're doing, stalls today. And, just like every new student thinks at one point, I thought stalls were when we were turning off the engine. Who knew that a stall was something aerodynamic? I can't tell you how many times students come to me, I say, okay, we're doing stalls today. They say, I'm really not too excited about turning off that engine. I say, no, it has nothing to do with that. We need to knock out the ground school first. I would have gotten my medical, and I would have enrolled in some sort of ground school. Again, I can't preach it enough. The hour you spend learning on the ground is going to save you 2 hours in the air, which saves you big bucks because you're getting billed every time that prop starts rotating. That's when you're spending the big bucks. So really do your diligence as far as that goes. Study, take your study time very seriously throughout that ground school. And again, it's something you can do a self-ground school too. Another thing I would have done is I would have shopped around. It's sometimes in some places it's hard to find a flight school. You want to just go to your little local airport, but sometimes you may be better off taking a drive, whether it puts you an extra 20, 30 minutes out of your way. Shop around. Look for a great flight instructor. Keep in mind, this is someone you're going to be spending at least 40 hours of your life in a tiny cockpit with. Okay, so think with that in mind. Interview instructors. What are your career goals? What is your relationship like with the boss? How long have you been here? How long have you been instructing? What is some of your experience? Again, can you only fly on the weekends? Can you fly during the weekdays? Find these things out early before you actually commit. The goal is to stay with the same instructor through all your training. Those of you who have been tossed around from instructor to instructor know exactly what I'm talking about. So don't get too excited like I did. I just went to the first flight school, said, sign me up, let's go today. Didn't even know, shook my instructor's hand and said, hey, I'm ready. And there's nothing wrong with being that eager, but you've got to mesh and match well with that instructor and find out early on. So the 3 things I would have done if I could do my flight training over is I would have got a medical first. And again, I got a great clean bill of health. However, you never know. Get that medical first. The second thing I would have done, I would have enrolled in some sort of ground school. Again, whether it be my online ground school that I put on, like what David's in, or just a ground school you do out at the airport. It doesn't matter, whatever your time allows you to. And the third thing I would have done is shopped around for a flight school, shopped around for that instructor. Remember, you don't necessarily have to go to a flight school. There are independent instructors out there. They're just sole proprietors that would be happy, that have access to several different aircraft, may even own their own aircraft. They would be happy to take you up. So shop around, network at the airport, and ask people around. What I want to know is if you guys could go back in your flight training, what would you have done different? I want to compile a great list of things you would have done different in your flight training that you believe would have made you a more successful, safer student pilot and private pilot, and as you continue with your hobby or your career. If you could go back and start your flight training over from day one, what are some things you would do over? If you're on M0A.com, leave me a comment below this video. You know you'll get a reply. If you're on YouTube, it's hard for me and all these other video sites to check all those comments, but you know if you're on M0A.com looking at this video, you know you'll get a response from me below. So go ahead, leave me your comment below. What would you do if you could start your flight training over? What would you do different? That's all I have for you guys this week. Most importantly, please remember that a good pilot is always learning. Have a great week, guys. See ya. Looking for a ground school to supplement your flight training? I want you to take a free 1-week trial of my online ground school. Just visit the URL groundschoolacademy.com.